Should we get going?
Sounds good.
Good.
Right. Great. Welcome or welcome back if you're joining us for another one of our great garden conversations. Today is all about artistry in the garden. So for the next hour or so, we're inviting you to remove any distractions and just unleash your creativity as we explore unexpected color combinations and wonderful ways that you can be creative in the garden. My name is Kathleen Hennessy, and I work with Monrovia's PR agency, Axiom Marketing. Before we meet the Monrovia team, I have a few things I need to cover with you today. We are recording this talk, but don't worry, we can't see or hear you. Your cameras are turned off and your microphones are muted. But that doesn't mean we don't want you to participate. We're encouraging everyone to ask questions throughout the presentation, and you can do that by entering them into your Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We have a few Monrovia team members here today that are going to be monitoring and answering your questions, and we'll have time at the end to answer a few live. If we don't get to your questions today, look for an email from us as a follow-up. We also have a second way you can participate. At the beginning of our discussion, we'll be asking you a question, so stay tuned for that. If you missed anything during our talk today, we will be posting this webinar on Monrovia's YouTube channel. You'll find lots of great video discussions and other topics on that channel as well. We'll be sending you a link to this conversation in your email very soon. With the housekeeping completed, let's meet our Monrovia experts. I'd like you to meet Katie Tamony. Katie is Monrovia's Chief Marketing Officer, but she really fills the role of Chief Storyteller and Trend Spotter. Katie has more than 20 years of experience in lifestyle and leisure industries, and she's the former editor of Sunset Magazine, a longtime avid gardener with specific interests in the ties between garden, art, health, and well-being. And I asked Katie what she thinks is the most unexpected thing in her garden, and she said her tree ferns. They give her garden the illusion of being in the jungle, a very Jurassic Park feel that her visitors always comment on. Right, Katie?
Yes, and they actually look like sculpture really in my garden, and they really play well with a wide variety of other plants. So that's why I love them.
Excellent. I'd also like you to meet Georgia Clay. Georgia is the new plants manager at Monrovia. She is our go-to plant expert. In her role, she works with breeders and plant finders from around the world to bring new plants to Monrovia. And part of her job includes trialing and testing plant varieties for years before they're available at the garden center. And because she is testing so many different plants, she thinks the color combinations she has unexpectedly created might be the most surprising things in her garden. And there was a pink and orange combo that you were telling me about, Georgia, that was a wonderful surprise.
Yes, I would have never thought to put it together, but I think we'll be looking at some pink and orange combinations today. So
great. So again, thank you for joining us today. Katie, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Kathleen. So let's get started talking about artistry and art in the garden. So to begin with, I'd like to talk about elements of artistry. And the image on the left is something I captured just walking around our nursery in Visalia, California. I think it demonstrates how part of being artistic in the garden is really about the powers of observation and just noticing when nature is really creating something quite artful. And then you as an artist can add your own seasoning to that. On the left is Osteospermum. It's Ostacade Daybreak, a fairly new variety for us. And I just happened to be strolling by a patch of Mystic Spire's Salvia and thought, wow, that would really go so well together. And immediately, as I paired them and thought about a container, I thought how gratifying it is to notice when plants belong together in a way that really makes them each shine a little brighter. And so part of being an artist in the garden is really noticing those moments. It's also something that can happen in the image on the right-hand side, which is noticing how light plays in your sight. You know, as you take a step back and think about your whole space, think about how light and maybe the walls of your house or the hardscape you use invite a certain mood. and how plants can help build on that mood. I think part of being an artist is creating a feeling. We definitely see that in art that we appreciate. And nature offers so many ways for us to create different moods. The landscape on the right is an example by Andrea Cochran, and it's a garden in Michigan. So two very different ways to approach art, but both, I think, are really the elements that are the foundation of what we're going to talk about today. So your garden is your canvas. It could be you can think about it as your orchestra, your playground. It's where your creativity meets nature's beauty and mystery. And I think especially in times that are challenging, stressful times for all of us, the garden really represents a place where you can connect to beauty, unleash your creativity in ways that are similar to how we look to music, other art forms, poetry, to make us feel good. And I think even if you're somebody that doesn't think of yourself as an artist, like I don't have any other creative talents, but in my garden, I can feel like I'm an artist. So a quick poll, what kind of artist are you? Are you the painter, somebody that really thinks primarily in terms of colors, maybe flowering shrubs, perennials, annuals? That's how you think about creating in the garden. Maybe you're the conductor, somebody that's really thinking about symmetry and repetition and pattern, and that's how you think about being an artist. Or maybe you're the playful experimenter, and being an artist really is about play and coming up with some surprises and ways to capture the imagination. So we have the poll going on right now, and I see that we really have a broad cross-section of different artistic types in our audience. Kathleen, let me know when we've concluded our poll.
We really do. Looks like playful experimenters winning by nose.
I think people that have been gardening for a while, you've already, you've sort of tried out what everybody else is doing. You do want to experiment. That's what excites you in the garden. So that doesn't surprise me actually to see that. And I think the playful experimenter is probably a type that crosses over into both areas. So that's fun to see. I'm gonna take this off my screen now and proceed to the first, an outline really of what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about color palettes for summer, definitely, playing with texture and pattern, unexpected playful combinations, and then how we can bring in other elements aside from plants to create our artistic vision. So to start with, talking about new palettes for summer, I want to underscore that where these ideas come from is part of our trend watching exercise that we embark in all the time. So we're always looking at what consumers are showing us they're wanting in their gardens, what breeders are working on, what media of various types are covering, sort of what's becoming popular. And we're starting to see some clear palettes emerge for summer that I think represent some ways that you can experiment in your own garden. So first up, the first palette I want to talk about is what we call Bohemian Purples. So we've talked before about the dressed up bohemian trend, which is, blending ombre shades, mixing, different colors together in the garden. And in this trend, in this palette, what we're seeing is more intense shades of purple. Purple has always been a good kind of common denominator color in the garden. It pairs well with many different other colors. But this trend is really looking at deep, deep, dark purples and then seeing that play off with echoes of lighter lavenders, maybe even buff white, and being accented with silvery or what I call white-green foliage, like sedges, for instance, have that sort of white-green look, variegated foliage. So really it's about using deeper purples and then playing that off with echoes of color, if you will. Georgia, what combinations do we have that really carry this out?
So our first combination is showcasing that rich, deep purple on the top left with Salvia dark matter. This is a Nemorosa type, so hardy to zone 4. And its claim to fame is really that super saturated, like I mentioned, deep purple flower that's almost double the size of other varieties. So a really large flower. It's one of the very first salvias to bloom in the spring, and then it will rebloom again in the summer. So you get quite a lot of season with this salvia. They're contrasted beautifully by that soft mounding texture of the maiden grass in the middle. And then we carry that purple hue through with that color wheel Stokesia. I love the depth that this of color that this plant brings to the combination. You know, the flowers start white, and then they move through shades of lavender and then mature again to that deep dark purple. It gives us that nice ombre effect. That's the staple of the Bohemian style garden that you mentioned, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second combination below starts with Lila Smokebush. Lila is a fantastic variety. It's a more compact version of Royal Purple, which is a pretty popular, larger Catinus. Instead of being 15 feet tall like Royal Purple is, Lila is only going to be about 4 feet tall. So that just makes it much easier to look after, much easier to keep looking nice throughout the year. And it does have that gorgeous deep dark color that we're talking about. Really love playing off the purple by using a lighter shade with something like this Provence French lavender. This particular variety, it blooms for a super long time and is wonderfully fragrant. French lavender is also great for attracting pollinators to the garden, which is always a plus. And then I really love the rounding out the combination with Stormy Sky Daylily. This variety blooms continuously throughout the season and has those beautiful, large, multi-tone purple and yellow flowers with the frilly edge.
And I think that idea of working with tone on tone kind of makes me think of watercolors. And when you think about, you know, maybe you start your painting, as it were, with a little bit of an intense shade and then kind of balance that out with a little echoing or dilution of that shade as you work through the garden. So next we have what I call the sherbet shades of summer. So think juicy colors that conjure images of popsicles, you know, whether that's melon or raspberry, citrus, and they can be cooled by this kind of icy blue-green foliage or maybe lime foliage. So this idea of kind of juicy summer color is becoming really popular and definitely influencing some of the new varieties that we're seeing.
Yeah, so this is similar to the unexpected combination that I loved in my garden this year. First up is the Supreme Cantalope Echinacea. It's perfect for giving that soft melon color. The double flowers are super abundant throughout the summer. They're held on these really sturdy stems. The plant itself is going to be about 2 feet tall at maturity, so a really nice size to make a statement. We are pairing that cantaloupe with that pop of pink from summer lasting strawberry crepe myrtle. This particular series was bred for early flowers and lots of them. It puts on several intense flushes of those pink flowers throughout the summer. It also has excellent disease resistance, so you shouldn't have issues with Cercospora and powdery mildew. Really unique habit as well. It's going to max out at about 3 feet tall and wide, so a really versatile shrub, really easy to tuck into smaller borders or into a container. We grow these in patio tree form as well, so that makes a really lovely container specimen also. And then Snowy Owl, which is a dusty miller, can be used as sort of a contrasting element. It has those big velvety silver foliage, and it can breeze through the summer heat without a problem. But below, if you're looking for something a little hardier, we do have Nitty Gritty Peach Rose with its gorgeous peachy pink flowers that are going to self-clean, repeat bloom throughout the summer. It's going to be about 3 feet tall by 4 feet wide, so we call that more of a ground cover type rose. Really nice high gloss, high shine foliage that's highly resistant to black spot. We've tested that extensively throughout the country, even in those high humidity places where that is a big problem. It's also on its own root. And what that means for those of you who live in really cold climates and have some stem dieback on your roses in the winter, because it's on its own root, you will still have the variety you've intended, because the new growth, even if it's directly from the ground in the spring, it's still going to be nitty gritty peach, which is a huge plus. It's not going to be the understock. You're not going to have a random red bloom on your rose. And then next to that is Georgia Peach Dianthus. This is from the American Pie series. Wonderful flowers on this. It has that blush pink with an almost coral center. It picks up those coral peach tones beautifully in the nitty gritty. This is a more upright type Dianthus, but it's only going to be about 10 to 12 inches tall. The foliage is also really has a sort of silvery blue tone to it, which is further picked up by that Elijah blue fescue. It highlights those peaches and pinks just beautifully.
And I think that Dianthus is such a great example of nature doing the artistry, just that flower alone just evokes so much possibility. But moving on to a third palette, we call this Summer Sangria. It's kind of a summer version of the dark light trend we've talked about before, and really think about wine and burgundy tones compared with or paired with splashes of pink. They could be really bright pink or more of a dusty pink or rose, such as you see here.
Yeah, so Evolution Chocolate Fountain Sedum has both that deep pink and the more dusty pink. It has the deep dark purple foliage that we love in this dark meets light trend. But the flower buds themselves are deep pink, almost purple. You can see that in the photo to the left. Then they open to this really pretty rosy pink flower. This particular series was bred for strong basal branching and strong stems, which means they're easier to maintain in the garden. They are less likely to flop over on themselves. Sedums are another excellent pollinator plant. They attract quite a lot of bees to the garden as well. And then Carly Rose, I think, is a fun grass for this theme because the flower plumes have this really subtle pink undertone to them, and they pair really nicely with other pinks in this Summer Sangria combination in this really nice understated sort of way. And they add both texture and movement, of course. And then lastly is Dark Star Purple Leaf Sand Cherry. This is a Prunus sestina. It has white spring flowers and then that beautiful deep red purple foliage that holds its color throughout the year, even in the heat of summer, this is all about a summer combination. So that's really great. Prunus sestina are prone to scab, and they have this reputation for being sort of dirty in the landscape. So you don't see them very often. But Dark Star is an awesome variety that was bred for compact habit and cleanliness. So this is from the University of Connecticut, and it has really stayed nice and clean so you can enjoy that foliage and enjoy that flower.
It sounds like a perfect variety then, if you're looking for this kind of like foundational plant too in your landscape. I'm really glad that you brought up pollinators and wind and movement, because all of those sensory aspects and having your garden really feel alive is part of the artistic part of designing your garden as well. It's not just thinking about what plants look like, but also how they move, how they sound, how they attract other life into the garden. So our fourth palette is something that we're calling Country Butter Yellow. So it's a softer yellow. It's not the bright yellows. We're talking about something that really sort of creates a calm mood in the garden, especially paired with white and green to create this kind of more sophisticated cottage look. So it's kind of a way to have upscale country cottage, I guess is the idea. But that yellow is really making a comeback too in our gardens.
Yeah, the first plant that came to mind with this theme was our Grace and Grit Yellow Rose. I think it just beautifully encapsulates this soft but saturated yellow that we're talking about. It's a traditional shrub rose, which is going to get about 5 feet tall by 5 feet or so wide in the landscape. Similar to Nitty Gritty, Grace and Grit is also on its own route. It's also going to self-clean and repeat bloom throughout the season. Also highly disease resistant. That can be really hard to find in a yellow. Most yellows have a little bit less disease resistance, but this has really been very clean for us. And then we've paired that with Echinacea Delicious Nougat, which is such a fabulous plant. Super excited to finally be able to offer this first to market this year. It has these white double flowers and then that yellow green inner cone, which just plays with that yellow color really beautifully. We've been trialing and looking at this plant for years and have been so impressed by it. The number of blooms that it produces throughout the season is incredible. It almost completely covers itself in flowers throughout the summer. And it has this really beautiful, perfectly mounded habit, really low maintenance. It's super easy. It's quickly become one of my very favorite echinaceas.
I could tell.
So nice. And then pairing that with like a variegated strappy grass, something like this ice dance sedge, which softens and adds a little texture. And then next is Creme de Mint Dogwood. This dogwood stands about 5 feet tall or so, so a nice size. It has that nice bright green and cream foliage with yellow stems. So it looks great in all 4 seasons. And then next to that is Lemon Puff Shasta Daisy. It has those sunny yellow flowers and then a darker yellow eye. Lemon Puff is nice because it's day length neutral. And what that just means is that you don't have to wait for the long days of summer to enjoy the blooms on this, like you would traditionally have to wait for other Shasta daisies. So you're able to get flowers in the spring and flowers in the fall as well. And then adding in some evergreens, something like Skyrocket Juniper, one of the narrowest junipers. So this is going to be about 15 plus feet tall and only about 3 feet wide or so.
And I like that the second combo here offers sort of maybe more structure, a little bit more formality in the garden, whereas the one just above is a little bit more casual and rambly. But so very different ways to go structurally, but with the same palette, which is kind of interesting. And then last in our color palettes is really the return of red. So we are seeing red making a big comeback in terms of what breeders are developing, what more and more people are drawn to this year, but not seeing red so much paired with the traditional blues or purples, seeing it with lavender, although that's perfectly fine. But what's really new is that we're seeing it with a whole warmer kind of palette. So with golden yellow, or even using red as the only color in your garden with lots of greenery, lots of foliage. We're seeing it kind of both ways.
Yeah, a great way to incorporate that saturated red is with Mandevia. One issue that we see with Mandevia, especially red ones, is that the flowers tend to fade out during the heat of the summer. So Sunvia Giant Red here is part of our Sunvia collection. We really love this series because they not only produce a ton of flowers throughout the summer, but they also hold on to their color as well. So they're not going to fade out. You're going to keep that saturated bright red that you're looking for. Giant Red, true to its name, has massive flowers and this really vigorous climbing habit. So whether you're in the garden full time with the Mandevia or you're just using it as an annual, it really is a beautiful plant. And then we're warming it up by incorporating that new gold lantana, another one that's going to blaze through the heat and flower through the summer. This is more of a spreading variety, so it's going to be about 1 foot or 2 tall, and it's going to reach about 4 feet wide or so. And then we're adding some architecture with that twin flowered agave in there. But you can get this same feeling in the garden, even if you're in a colder region, just by swapping out for hardier selections in that same color family. So that's what we've done below with the Harlequin Red Penstemon. Penstemon is another genus that tends to get kind of tall, a little bit floppy in the garden. I really love this Harlequin series because it's naturally more compact and multi-stemmed, a little bit sturdier. It's going to stay about 2 feet tall, but it does have these really beautiful large flowers that again are going to rebloom throughout the summer. Excellent for attracting hummingbirds and other pollinators as well. And then we're warming it up with the Sunstar Gold Coreopsis. This is a tick seed type, hardy to zone 4. I really love that it has that red inner eye, so it carries the color through. And then the rest of it is that golden yellow, which really warms up the combination. Another plant that's going to blaze through the summer heat, continue to look great. And then we're adding that same architectural element with something a little bit tougher, a little bit hardier, this color guard yucca.
I really plan on adding one of these combos to my garden this year. I'm super excited to see red coming back. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about creating a symphony in the garden and using textures and pattern. And when I think about that, I think about grasses and just, large green foliage plants, ferns. I have a lot of those, and I happen to have a lot of those in shady parts of my garden. And I think the idea here, thinking artistically, is really about contrasts and using some smaller leafed plants with broad leafed sort of punctuation moments. You can see in the garden on the lower right, this idea of using a ratio of kind of 3 to 1, where you've got maybe you do Japanese forest grass, you've got 3 of those with some broad leafed, plant to act as an accent. And applying those ratios can help your garden from feeling like it's just utter chaos. If you want to create some, pattern and symmetry, think about that 3 to 1 ratio in terms of providing some balance. And then when we think about combinations that would play well together, Georgia, you've created just 2 of many that, people could choose from. So tell us a bit about these 3. I mean, these 6 on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, the options are really endless with this. But the first up, the top row is showcasing that different foliage texture, so different sizes and shades of green. Starts with lime tuff lamandra. Such a great plant. It's true to its name, super adaptable, super tough. This plant thrives in the sun, in the shade, on really virtually any irrigation schedule or lack of one. It's a really great plant, great for adding texture. It has that true green foliage color as well. And then Pittosporum Tasman Ruffles, which adds a totally different texture, a totally different shade of green, smaller foliage, almost crinkled when you look at it up close. It has that lighter green color, a creamy white margin, and then a darker stem, which you can kind of see in that photo there. This would be really nice for the back of a border. It's going to be about 10 feet tall, so a really nice, almost pyramidal form. And then next to that, you have Dianella, which is that wider, strappier, more upright texture, a little bit more architectural in nature. Super hardy and adaptable combination of plants. These all 3 would be great in a drought-tolerant garden or even a coastal garden. If you live near the coast, this would be an awesome combo. And then the next combination below, playing off of that 3 to 1 rule that you mentioned, Katie. Here we were using Evercolor Everlight Sedge as our edging. So you can imagine that in your group of 3. And then Fireworks Rajersia is acting as your punctuation point in the middle. I really love this fireworks. The foliage on the plant is super large and really quite divided. It's a deeper green with bronzy red accents in the margins. You can see in the summer, it does produce a really large, deep pink flower. And then to fill in the spaces, we've opted for a green ground cover. Something like sweet woodruff would really look nice here. A totally different shade of green again, a totally different texture. That one in particular, it does have a nice white flower in the spring and summer too.
And I think the great thing about this idea of using texture and pattern, if you keep it to greens, you can mix a lot of different plants and really create something quite special. Okay, so moving on to playful experimentation. These 2 images on the left are actually from the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, where we provided a lot of plants recently for their spring flower display. And I think it's a great example of how you can be playful and make some different choices in the garden. One way is to use more evergreens, conifers paired with annuals, perennials. You can see that in the snapshot on the left-hand side, that they're not, clustering just perennials with flowering shrubs, but instead really bringing in a lot of evergreens. And then the image in the middle there demonstrates how you can blend houseplants such as the calathea or that Ficus teneki. They're in the back with the larger leaves. You can use those to add graphic impact, to add structure and sculpture with other plants, that might be more common in your garden, whether that's annuals or perennials, to create this lush feeling. I think that one of the things to keep in mind with playful experimentation is to group plants together in mass, like you kind of see with the Echinacea on the right-hand side, that using sort of blocks of color out in your garden, but using different kinds of plants to do that can create something really quite marvelous. And I love the combinations that you've put together for people to experiment with a little bit here.
Yeah, so much fun to put together a few designs for this theme. The first one is sort of a shady tropical combination. So it's utilizing that highly patterned foliage of the prayer plant, or Maranta amabilis. I think that's how you pronounce it. I really like this particular, the Maranta, because it has that highly graphic pattern. It looks like a calathea, which is very popular. But in our experience, and in my personal experience as well, it tends to be much easier to keep alive and thriving in lower humidity areas. So it's a little easier, but it still has that great pattern on it. We're combining that with the upright, dark, strappy, wide cast iron plant. This is one of those nearly indestructible plants. It's hardy to zone 6, and it does super well in a lot of different conditions. One of my favorite ways to use this is dry shade, which can be a really tough, a tough place to fill, and cast iron plants typically do pretty well there. And then we're adding another bit of texture with a southern wood fern in this example, but really any fern would be great. I really could see in this, you could easily have the cast iron plants and fern in the garden full time. And then you could plant your house plants for the summer, just like you would an annual, for your little pop of color and foliage.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and then next below is a more colorful, more sunny combination. So we're starting with Canova Mango Canna Lily. Canovas in general, excellent landscape plants. They put on a ton of flower spikes. They're going to be about 3 feet tall by 3 feet wide. We're picking up the coral pink of that mango flower with the pinky variegation of the Belize rubber plant, or Ficus elastica. Just love how it brings out the best of both of those plants. And then we're adding a bit of drama with that black mondo grass, a little dark versus light here.
Love that combination. That really gets at some of the other things we talked about. Pink, really being prominent, the ombre shades on that Ficus elastica. And people, often ask, can I bring my houseplant outdoors, for the summer? And, yeah, that's a great thing to do. Change up the look of your outdoor spaces, as well as, give the houseplant, another environment at just the right time. So another playful combination, going back to this idea of mixing evergreens with perennials, you've put together this really great trio.
Yeah, so something like the Green Sport Western Red Cedar. Oftentimes you see these used as a backdrop or a screen, but you could easily, this is a more compact variety, and it's going to retain its green color. So you could mix it up and have a little bit of fun and plant it more in your garden, in the center, intermixed with something like this Apex Pink Salvia. Another great variety of salvia. Apex is one of the best and fastest rebloomers on the market. So it's just going to have continuous color throughout the entire summer. And then adding in some fun, fuzzy silver ground cover tones with something like that silver carpet lamb's ear. It just brings a little bit of texture, a little bit of contrast to this to make it a little more playful.
I think this is a great sort of like license to, think differently about maybe the plants that find their way into your summer landscape. Just get you thinking a bit differently. And I also know that we've got so many examples of conifers and even evergreens that that are sort of golden yellow in color. So you can actually think about pairing those with, red, for instance, or some of the other colors that we've talked about. Think about yellow foliage evergreens. So the other key component that I wanted to talk about with artistry in the garden is really what other elements are going to frame your vision. And none of us are creating these plant combinations kind of in a vacuum. We're all dealing with our site, as I said at the very beginning, thinking about walls, thinking about paving materials. And what I think you truly want to think about is how the paint color on your walls and window frames, and this window box example, for instance, that should really be part of your palette. That really you want to be thinking about that with the plant combination that you're choosing and how that's going to bring your artistry to life. So thinking about your wall color, especially your fence background, decking, for instance, also those warm tones that you're going to see in some materials really will kind of help, dictate what palettes work best in your landscape. It could also be, seating areas, furniture. Your outdoor furniture is part of your artistic vision. Gates, not to mention artwork that you might also bring in, but think about all these other elements and how they either complement or fight with some of the palettes that you're drawn to. So we now have a little bit of time for questions, and I'll shoot it back to Kathleen to see if there are any questions that she'd like us to answer in the last few minutes that we're together.
I'm going to leave my video off just to see if that works. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Excellent. So one of the questions that we had was they wanted you to explain a little bit more the use of the 3-to-1 ratio. So tell us, is it one large plant to 2 smaller ones, or what's the application of that?
Yeah, so the idea there is that, using a little bit of mathematics like you find in music, thinking about your symphony, to think about balance. And so it would be choosing, let's say, 3 smaller edging plants, such as a sedge or a forest grass, something, along your border, having 3 plants, that same plant, just repeat, and then 1 larger broad-leafed plant to be your statement, kind of behind or complementing those 3 plants. So 3 of one kind of plant contrasted with 1 bigger statement plant was the idea. And you could repeat that with other plants or the same plant throughout your garden.
Excellent. The other next question that we had was, do nitty gritty roses have a scent?
Some of them do. It's definitely not the what we selected them for, but luckily the peach and the yellow have a really beautiful scent, and all of them have a sort of light scent, but the peach and the yellow I think are the most fragrant.
Great. Getting a lot of questions about plant lists for that you guys have talked about and where they can find information on everything that you've discussed. We will be posting this webinar to the YouTube channel, and we will also be sending you a link to it in your email very soon, along with a plant list as well. So look for that very soon.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add is that if you go on our website and look at My Plant Finder, you can select too, as you start to filter through plant choices. If you go through special features, you can actually select too by color, and you can search for plants by color in the search bar on our site.
Excellent. Another question that we had was, how large does Dark Star get at maturity?
Oh, that's a great question. I want to say 5 feet tall, but man, am I right? But let's see.
Look it up for sure and get back to you.
5 feet tall by 4 feet wide. Yep.
Mhm.
My intuition.
Nice. Well done.
Excellent. Great.
And I saw that we had a question too about incorporating flowers in a small desert landscaping garden. And I think there's actually a lot of choices now in terms of having color in a desert landscape. Georgia, are there a few that come to mind?
Yeah, actually we grow quite a few of Savano Nurseries plants, and they are out of Arizona.
Mhm.
And they have a lot of different options. So we've added a couple of new plants of theirs, and we have a bunch. So we have a beautiful San Antonio rose, which is a pink flowering variety. And we also have some native desert milkweed. There's quite a few options. I would look at, again, you can use our My Plant Finder to find some options. You can also check out Savano Nursery, and we do grow quite a lot of their plants, which are perfect for the desert, specifically the desert Southwest.
Great.
A lot of questions about that window box image that you had, Katie, towards the end of the presentation.
Yeah, that actually was combining begonia and a little bit of variegated ivy and a fern, just in the middle. It was a nice sort of shady window box idea. Again, kind of hearkening back to the texture and pattern idea of just, using a variety of greens and then having a nice soft pink to complement.
Great. Well, I think that is about all we have time for today. Again, we will be posting this webinar on the Monrovia YouTube channel, and you'll receive a link with a plant list in your email very soon. So thank you again, Georgia. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. It was a pleasure again to be together, and we look forward to having our next webinar in June. So look out for that.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Have a great day gardening.